When I first became a beekeeper, I was going to grow all these wildflowers about the size of this room, not realizing they forage over 5 circular kilometers, right? So I had it all planned. I planted all my seeds, set up my hives, perfect spot, without even remembering Winnie the Pooh. I set them right up at the edge of the bear trail. So yeah, first year, it usually happens around late July when everything's looking perfect. Bear shows up and starts watching me while I'm keeping the bees, and so it's like, oh no, here we go. So I started chasing him away for about 3 days and was feeling like, I don't know, one of those old-time 80s wrestlers. I'd run at him, and he would go running. And then 3 days later, it started chasing me, and then it's running the other, I was growling, and then, once it growled, I ran home. And then, that night, it became the bear's bees, and there's nothing worse than picking up bees after the bears got them, because they're actually after the larva for the protein, so they're eating all the young bees, and you know the stories about the honey, that's just the icing on the cake for them. So the key out here, electric fencing. Yeah, I tried all sorts of things in the beginning, and the bees are mad when their home's all shattered and they're lying in the grass, and it's just not fun. But the electric fencing works like a charm, and it's dirt cheap. Like my fence went down last summer, and so it's like, oh no, I have to get a new fence. And in my mind, it was a big deal, and $100 and some bucks. You can do up to like 60, well extra if you want, but like you can do up to like 60 kilometers off one charger. You can plug it right into the house, solar panels. And then you can throw in your compost in there, your chickens and everything else, and have everything in one spot, right? And then, it's not a problem. The bears haven't been a problem in about 10 years since I got a fence. They come around, but once they test the fence, But the electric fencing is not just for bees, but I think any type of livestock or even big compost operations is kind of crucial out here, because you'll get away with it for, like I said, until everything looks awesome. And you've got it most time you ever had it. And then the bear gets it.
Do rats ever get into the bees?
No, see, it's funny because I've heard lots about rats and mice and closing up the entrances really small in the winter, but I've never, I had my chickens over there for years, and there was lots of bush rats running around, but they never, I even saw them under the hives, but never have gone into the hives. But I know like a lot of places, they're like worse than bears for being pests for the bees, because they'll go in when the bees are in cluster at winter and you can't move, set up a nest in the corner, and then just pick off bees and honey all winter, right? So wipe out a hive pretty quick.
Okay, so I don't know anything like about beekeeping or whatever. So what's your day-to-day in terms of like maintenance, and then like how do you get started? Like if I want to have some bees on my property, how would I begin?
First thing you do is want to source your bees, and so there's some really good people on the island. You kind of want to start that early in the year, because they'll sell out by spring. But now there's still time. Like I know Saul Nowitz, Jigglepot Apiaries, is really good guy to deal with. But there's 2 ways. You can get a package of bees, which is you can get them in the mail even, and it's a queen bee in a package with about 5,000 bees or so, and then. Put that, first I'll start with, you can make all your own equipment out of scraps. Okay. So like if you look online, it would cost you a couple $100 to get like the hive set up that you see, but you can make all of that for free out of pallets, like pallet wood and stuff like that. So everything is basically free. So you just need to buy your bees to begin, and then from there you can just grow them out. But you can get a package of bees, which would come with a queen and a bunch of bees. You basically just shake the bees into the box, put the queen in their cage. She has a little marshmallow in the end of the cage, because bees are weird. They have a tendency can't survive without a queen, but if you give them a queen right away without the pheromones in place, they call it balling the queen. They just all gather around her and cook her. And then it's the weirdest thing you'll ever see. And you can even have a queenless hive that's all they need to rebuild, and sure enough, you put a new queen in there and it's like, So you get a little cage with a marshmallow in the end, and by the time the other bees eat through the marshmallow, they're used to her pheromones, and she's ruling the hive, and then it's totally fine. So this package of bees, even 100 and some, I don't know the prices these days, but put them in the box, put the queen in between the frames, and I'll pass this around. These are just old. I got them out of the freezer. Frames out of the freezer that I give back to the bees. So your box would just be like a box like that, and frames. The bees would draw all this stuff themselves if you let them. So you put your queen in the middle like that in the box. And They should go. You can pass that around. They might be sticky. Smell them. But the best way to go is to buy like a nucleus colony, and that's already a colony that has a queen that's laying, and different stages of brood, which are the baby bees. So you'd have a frame of eggs, a frame of larvae, and then a frame of capped brood that are ready to hatch, and the laying queen. So it puts you way ahead of the game, because if you use a package, they first have to build all the comb, which is the most tricky equipment to come by, because it takes 10 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So the bees, like especially in small numbers, to gather that amount of materials to just start from scratch is a huge deal. So if you pay the extra $50 for a nucleus colony, you got a queen that's already laying, all the stages of development, and those things will blow up. Like in 3 weeks, you got to start worrying about swarms and doing swarm splits and stuff. So it's really, it's really easy to get started. And maintenance-wise, you could do as much or as little as you want. And in the beginning, it's good to go through lots just because you're learning, even though that's how you make all your mistakes, which is how you learn. And then after that, like there's two really critical times. Is you always want to, you get attached and always want to check in. But swarm season, you've got to check in, or else half your bees disappear and end up in the neighbor's drywall or something, and probably doesn't go over good. And then mite treatment. We have varroa mites on the island, which one of the last places on Earth to get them. I think Australia is just starting to get them. And that was, I don't know if you guys remember the signs on the ferries that said, "Do not bring honeybees to the island." Well, back in the 80s, some guy did that, and he's still in jail for it. But yeah, then we were overridden with mites, and that's the most challenging part. So in the spring, swarm season, late spring, and in the fall, treating for mites is your major things. And then other than that, it's just playing around with them kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can like still like go away for a while.
Oh, you could go away all summer if you wanted to. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just
What's the swarm thing?
well, it's how they reproduce. So a healthy hive is that's doing good, lots of honey and stuff like that. The queen sends out this, I don't know what they call it, but some sort of impulse that sends all the other workers, which are all females, into like except for the males, they get kicked out in the fall. It's a great story. So they don't do any work and they eat all the honey, so they get like cattle out the door to freeze. But anyways, they start building queen cells, which are daughter queens. Any egg can become a queen, depending on what it's fed. So they start building these specific cells, quite a few of them, and then just feeding them tons of royal jelly, which is what the queen gets fed to turn them into a queen. And then the old queen, as soon as those queen cells are all in there, because she's got daughter queens ready to hatch, takes half the workers and half the honey and goes and finds a new home. So it's kind of like things are good. It's how they reproduce. So here it's like to their daughters, like, here's my house, I'm going to the retirement home over here kind of thing, you know, and takes half the workers and half the honey and leaves, which is not a big deal. It's like, I mean, somewhere where there's fence posts and stuff, it'd be great, like in the prairies, because you could look out across the field and, oh, there's a swarm of bees out on the fence posts. Because when they leave, they're really gentle. They leave en masse, like it's wild. And then they find a spot to make like a ball, and they just hang there for a bit, and they're really peaceful because they're gorged on honey and they don't have a home to defend. And they send out scout bees for a couple days trying to find a new location. So you have that 2 or 3 windows if you can find them to go gather them up and just take them home and put them in a box. But the problem out here is they end up 200 feet up in a cedar snag, right? So you're just watching them and then you can't get to them or anything like that. Yeah, but a swarm of bees is basically a new colony, so it's...
So you try to prevent,
Yeah, well, I do. Some people like think it's just natural and stuff like that, but it can, I don't know, I haven't had swarms in years. My first years, it was like, there was a week there when I was like, no, they're flying off. My neighbors were running an excavator and a chainsaw, and they stopped the machines, they're like, what's that? And they looked up above my house, and this big cloud started drifting across the thing. So I tend not to let that happen, just because the bees are worth money, and I like having as many bees as I can.
How do you prevent it?
Keep watching them and checking in, and when you start seeing those queen cells, go through the whole hive, find the old queen, take her, put her over in. Yeah, have a box ready, move her over there, grab enough for her to keep workers and stuff like that to keep going there. And then you can take each one of those queen cells and put them, divvy them up, and then you've got split. So you make her, as soon as you put her in that box, she thinks she's swarmed and is like, oh, this is awesome, you know? Yeah, and then that totally, yeah.
Fascinating.
Well, going back onto splits that you're just alluding to
Yeah.
right there, are you doing that with those supersedure cells, or how are you doing the splits?
I do the splits, I wait for swarm season. You could
Okay.
do them anytime, because if you could even just take a toothpick and open up a cell, and as soon as they don't have a queen, they will start trying to rear one.
Okay.
But the swarm queens are apparently really, really strong queens. So a lot of times they'll make there's two types of queens: an emergency queen, that's like when the queen kicks the bucket and they have to make one, or like the swarm cells where they're focused that energy into that. So they will make those emergency queens, but from what I've heard, I haven't really paid attention, is that a lot of times they'll just use them for a bit and then try to make enough, like they
Right.
don't turn out really, really strong.
So when,
queens.
how do you do your splits then? You're just taking from the supersedures and placing them
I-
over? Do you bring anything with them, or?
Well, yeah, you need to have, so you've got your queen, she needs to have like three frames of bees and so basically you're making up one of those nucleus colonies I was talking about. So if you have a strong hive, like I've split one into 5 before, and then each frame with one of those queen cells has, so there's the queen cell, and you need to have the same, you need some brood, some eggs, and some honey, just so there's, and then after that hatches, she has to go out and mate and come back and stuff. But each hive has to have either a queen cell or a queen, but it's,
And then just related, you were talking with the varroas, I use oxalic acid in the
okay, yeah,
vaporizer.
yeah, winter time or?
I have a schedule, and before the brood is closed in
Yeah.
the spring on the first set, I
Okay,
treated them, and then once again in the fall after they're kind of moved inside, so I'm not disturbing as much.
yeah.
Do you use oxalic acid? or do
I'm
you-
still a formic guy. I have the oxalic, but I've never actually done it, so it's kind of like, in the middle of winter, I always want to, because the bees are broodless, so they don't have these mites hide in the cells. So there's a time of year when the queen's not laying, and the mites can't hide anywhere, which is a really good time to nuke the mites. These are all organic acids, by the way, we're talking about. And I've never used it, so I'm a formic guy, and I usually just do the formic flash treatment in the fall, and then see how things go in the spring. And I've never used like the products they sell for formic, just because I think
The
they,
strips or whatever?
yeah, I think they work great, like even in port and stuff where the temperatures are up. But out here on the coast, you have like a good day where the temperatures are perfect for formic, but if you have the strips, it's supposed to be in the hive for 6 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks it's foggy, and then so none of that is vaporizing, right? So I just go in and get a paper towel, put it on an old beer carton or cardboard or whatever, syringe of formic, which is it's an organic acid that ants sting with. So it's in lots of foods. It's already present in the hive. The bees know what it is. But put it in there, dosage relatively depending on the temperature, and then it's gone kind of by the end of the day, and it seems to work quite well just out here because. Just the way the temperatures are, you can flash it up quick and get it out of the hive. And I know the oxalic, I know Mattentown got a vaporizer, and I just don't know, I've never tried it.
Yeah, I was just wondering in terms of success, like I look at the bottom board at the end just to see how many
Yeah.
heads and do the counts, and this year was excellent, almost 0. But I was just wondering, because I know Matt's been using he's not using the oxalic anymore.
You didn't like it, or?
Well, I think it was just the convenience of the formaldehyde. I think it went with the vaporizer. You know, you got
Hook it up to the battery
and I put it on, and it's still. But I had a lot of success with it so far. And I was just
Okay,
wondering-
yeah, so I've been meaning to try, because it'd be great in the middle of winter, just when you're always like, get those, you might have had a really good mite drop, but then all of a sudden you're not looking at your bees in the winter, and it's middle of the night, and you're like, wonder what's going on. Perfect time to
Put my ear up to the.
Oh yeah, I train them in the fall. I train them because I use the little top entrance and then no bottom entrance. It works good, but and then I have a feeder hole if need be above on the inner cover. But I train them up there in the fall so that in the winter I can go out at night, shine the flashlight into the thing and see what size the cluster is, right?
Yeah.
And then I know, I can kind of see where they're at.
So that brings it, now for the winter time, sorry, I'm dominating,
no
but with the feeding, do you have any idea in terms of, I left everything this year because I was
Yeah.
a little worried about in terms of what to leave them for the winter. Do you do a feeding schedule, and if you do, what time? Or?
If they're gonna die of starvation, I'll throw sugar on. I try in the winter. I wouldn't ever like consider any sort of like sugar water or anything like that. I would throw like some dry sugar around. If they need it, they'll take it.
Okay.
And then that's also pulling moisture out of the hive, and they'll come up for it if they need it. But yeah, I tend to just leave as much honey as I can, and plus like sugar's expensive, so you know.
So you don't feed typically in a feeder.
Only on like if you were doing really weak splits right off the bat and they didn't have enough foragers to keep themselves going, or if there was nothing in bloom and they were out of food, because then they're just going to starve and die. So it's better to get them through. Even there's different ideas on it, but I'd rather give them 3 weeks of sugar and get them through when there's nothing coming in, and then let them go from there. So yeah. Sometimes I think out here sometimes it's like you almost, especially with smaller ones, you almost kind of have to at certain times when they're starting out. And if you got a package bee to start, you'd want to feed them right off the bat.
You pretty much have to.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
resources.
So if this is our bees' first winter, do we need to feed them now?
Well, if you left lots of honey, you're fine. But I always would put just put a little bit of just dry sugar up there. And if they're a lot of times you'll go in the spring and it'll be like, they'll just have thrown it all down on the bottom because they don't want it anyways. But it can't hurt to have it there if you're not sure. Just give the hive a lift. And even last week I was like, can't see any of them up at the top, so they're somewhere in these boxes, and then so I had to do the old, there they are, yeah, they're off in the corner. But yeah, no, I'd say like don't feed if you don't have to. It draws ants and stuff, which could be a big problem. I've had ants wipe out a hive, or especially yellow jackets. Those are the bald-faced hornets. Those things are evil. Those.
Are those the, oh, sorry. That's okay. How much honey do bees produce in the summer or whenever?
Here, or
I don't know. Yeah, depending on the size of your hive,
Yeah, it's weird because a small hive sometimes will make lots of honey, and then a big hive, because they got so many mouths to feed, will just have enough to get by. And somewhere in an agricultural area, people get 200 pounds off a hive. I'd say out here a good.
how big of a what's a standard hive size?
It'd be the size of this thing, a couple boxes though,
Yeah.
and then and you stack them as you go.
Yeah.
So it's just as they fill up, just add another box,
Okay.
and they'll just keep building up. And usually they'll do their nest in the lower boxes, and then they want to crown themselves for winter with honey, so they put honey on the sides, and then honey on the bugs, so they can always just reach for, kind of thing. I'm not even gonna say it. Beer over there. And then they'll always move up. So that's what people do. The queen won't people use an excluder that'll keep the queen down so she's not laying eggs up in the honey supers. But typically the queen doesn't want to go past the honey anyway, so the nest stays in the middle.
And then you just harvest from around it?
The top, yeah, you definitely leave the sides for them, and then what they have crowned on top. But when you see pictures of the box beehive standing tall, each one of those boxes that you start stacking up is honey that you can harvest.
Okay.
So in an agricultural area, 200 pounds. Out here, 20 pounds from a hive is a good year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's not a big money maker, but you definitely have enough for yourself and friends and family.
Okay.
And years extra too, so yeah, you never know.
Hi, Chad.
Hey.
Just a quick question about the maintenance difference between, because you're talking about European honeybees, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you have, and maybe this is a silly question, but can you have European honeybees and native?
Oh yeah, I have more native bees now than I ever had. Oh yeah.
And do they compete for habitat or food?
Not really. They're all in they have different sizes, especially a lot of the native pollinators. They're with a lot of the plants out here, you get the cinnamocha and all that. They have totally different size proboscises or whatever. So the honeybees are basically they're invasive, so they're tapping a lot of like the invasive species like dandelions, which the native pollinators love too. But they can't even access some of the wild plants and stuff like that. So I thought about that in the beginning, like, okay, I'm bringing in 1 million of these creatures.
Yeah.
And then what's that? And I just see more and more bumblebees, more hummingbirds, more everything, because it's just they do share a bit. So if you know, the more bees next year, there's that many more flowers. So it just all seems to go fine. Yeah. No, I've noticed as long as you're leaving spaces, and not as long as you're not nuking your yard just for honeybees, and you're leaving those corners and grasses and nooks and stuff for the wild pollinators, no problems. Yeah, I've never seen an issue, and I've done a little bit of studying. Like they're all specific for their problems too. Like bumblebees get mites, but they're not the same mites as honey. So it's not like, yeah. There's two schools of thought of it, but what I've seen firsthand is,
That's really
it's been the opposite of kind of what you'd think. You know, it's no like the honeybees will like they're their worst enemies because they'll like. Start trying to work. They're like people. One hive will be like, "Oh, we got it all. Let's go get that little hive stuff too," because they can't defend it, kind of thing, you know. Or bad people, I guess. But so they will rob each other and stuff like that. So, and the yellow jackets will rob the bees. But I don't personally. I don't think it's.
So then, are there as intensive maintenance, like activities and procedures that you can do with mason bees, for example, that help?
Oh yeah, like just leave lots of spaces for them to nest. Like I was gonna get some mason bees going, and then I started noticing all like the wormholes in my house or something like that. Those are like the perfect spots. So like or you know, old rotten logs and stuff. Just leave stuff like that.
And then don't cut your grass down in certain areas.
No, well this is weird because I started out doing that where it's like, I'm going to let the grass all grow up for the bees, and then I got this awesome field of dandelions, and then all of a sudden it was turning into alders. So there's like a fine line when you have to mow to keep going. So I'll mow my grass to let the weeds come up, and then when the grass starts taking over, I've kind of figured it out which is blooming when, and then I mow when I know something's done. It was, I think the lupins, not lupins, what are they called? It's one of those healthy...
Fireweed?
Fireweed, they love the fireweed. It's just like a plantain, that's it. So my yard was all of a sudden full of plantain, but no flowers. And then it got those are the things that kids like get the stem and then shoot off at each other. And so I was thinking, oh, there's all this plantain. Bees aren't going to touch the grass or something, right? Came out in the morning, and the bees are really weird, like the same as the fireweed. They can only get nectar at like, I don't know, it's like 25 degrees, so that's why fireweed's not a big one out here, because it doesn't get warm enough for the nectar. But anyways, I walked out on a dewy morning, and I was like, what the whole just... So for about 2 hours every morning, this plantain was just covered with bees, and for like 3 or 4 weeks at a time, which for years and years I'd be like, mow it down, like just not even thinking about it, you know? So a lot of times, and then as soon as that goes to like, it's done flowering, I know it's going to seed, it's like, I'll mow it down, and then the dandelions will pop up through there, so it's just kind of like juggling it, I guess.
Yeah, paying attention to.
Yeah, and that's my grass kind of thing, you know,
Yeah.
or grass maintenance.
Thank you.
Alright.
I haven't seen the amount of bees for the last 2 years that I saw previously in my yard.
Yeah.
We're
Well,
all at Chad's house.
no, they're actually in her.
In my place.
They are actually in your house. Well, last year was the year before last year. I'd been working for 8 years to go mite-free treatment. Lost majority of everything. That was the whole thing, and everything like growing anything coincided against me at that time. So I'd spent like 7 years doing the best I could with genetics and had everything built up really good. And I was like, that's it, because I'm gonna let them go and then breed whatever survives, and lost a lot of bees. And so last year was building back up from there.
So this year should be good.
Should be good, yeah. That cold snap was a bit of a bummer because they're at their smallest numbers right now. So normally they have a lot of winter bees in January when that happens. So it's hard on some of this, but yeah, it's going to be a good year.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. No, there's probably a couple years when they were bothered.
Pardon?
Were they ever a bother?
No, I
Okay.
have my Chinese palm flowers, and that's where they come, and they just lay.
I would have never thought of that.
They just
yeah.
laden with pollen, and they can hardly fly. But the last 2 years, they haven't done it, and I don't see the evidence in the greenhouse or anything, so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this year will be.
And it's weird too, because it all depends on, they seem to like, you think they branch out and just flower to flower to flower, but they're like an army being like, blackberries on, and that's all they'll go to. So there could be, there's just a
Other things.
bloom that happened at the same time where there was like a mass wild bloom that they were working, and then the year before that bloom hadn't happened, but the palm was on, and then that was the main source at that time.
Okay.
How far will they fly, Chad?
I think they, whoa, that's a big bubble, sorry. Up to, they forage a circle like 2 to 5 miles,
Okay.
but if times are tough, they'll go like 8 to 10. I've seen them in town from
I
my
was
house.
wondering if they went all the way to town.
Yeah, I've seen them before, but rarely, like in late fall when the clover starts coming up in the grass and the blackberries are over, then I've seen them close in. And who knows, like I said, those first years of swarms, who knows
Where
those
they
go.
went.
That's the worst. I had one in like 8 years last year, but I was chasing that thing, I was running through the brush, and it would get up and move, and then I'd go, and then people are looking because there's some sketcher looking all weird coming through the yard, and it's the middle of camping season, so he doesn't look like,
Okay, we live in a pretty rural area, and I heard that you can let your swarms go and that it can benefit nature, etc. Is that a risk?
To me it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great, like, but it kind of reminds me of like the measles thing that's happening. It's great, but then, you live in an area with 4 other beekeepers, and everyone's treating for mites except for that one beekeeper. As soon as your bees go out and end up in these congregations, then the mites are coming back. And then, so when the swarms are happening, there's two things. First off, there isn't technically any rules here. In an urban area, you start letting swarms go, they're going to shut down beekeeping eventually. So that's one thing. But then also, now your bees, which basically pretty hard for them to survive without a beekeeper, the way things are these days. Now your bees, you're losing half your bees. Your bees are setting up shop somewhere else, but they're unchecked for diseases, viruses, mites, and can then swarm and can, it's just, there's no way to manage them and know what's happening with their health and how they're affecting the other bees in the area. So the swarms happen, and letting them go is like the gift, it's like you always are like cursing yourself, but it's like, I wouldn't like just be, there's this one guy I heard a story about, and he's a swarm catcher, right? The IRS caught him because he'd go catch a swarm. He'd drive up the road about 2 kilometers, let the bees out, and then sit by the phone. And then 10 minutes later, he'd get a call for the same bees, go there. So he was making like $500,000 one summer, and then the tax people were like, "What? Wait a second, what's going on?" So, but you don't really want to be. It's great for the environment when it happens, and it does happen. But it's like
risk.
It's not even that. It's just like you don't want to just, you know where the bees are, and
just to follow up, will they live? Do you think?
they can, but realistically, this day and age, without someone watching over them, maybe 2 years before the mites take over. It's impossible to almost have mite-free bees. Can't even get mite-free bees, really. I don't think.
I don't know about mites much, but I did some whooping in Newfoundland, and they're doing beekeeping as part of the program.
Yeah.
He's telling me it's unique in Newfoundland where they don't have disease yet, or I'm not sure which one. Is that?
Yeah, no, all the north. I think
it's on touch when you only I don't know, because it's so isolated.
Yeah, well, that was my plan too. It's just he might not I mean, it comes in. There's lots of times I don't see diseases and stuff, and lots of times it's all cyclic, right? Like the mites. In some years, it's like you can let the mites go, no problem, and then other years it's like Yeah, and he might,
He
you never
didn't
know.
treat his bees or anything. He said it was like a non-issue in Newfoundland.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I've gotten bees through not treating before too, and it all depends. As like you were saying, you want to monitor that stuff. So he was talking about counting his mites. So like there's a little tray and a board underneath, and then you can see how many mites are dropping off the bees and kind of calculate whether you need to do anything or not. So if he does, you should pass his phone number around.
Yeah, freaking. Well, there was other. He just like started. He knows a lot of beekeepers in Newfoundland, like in Newfoundland too. But I could definitely, if you want to, I don't know. He definitely knows more about it than I do.
Yeah, no, I think all of North America, everyone deals with the same thing. So
Yeah.
Hi, I want to talk about the hives.
Mm-hmm.
I saw on the YouTube we got these hives. They're like self-tapping.
Yeah.
So you don't need an extractor and everything. Do you know anything about that? Is that a good idea or not? Or
I mean, it's one of those things. Personally, I think it's a good idea because it get lots of people into beekeeping because it looks like, oh sweet, go to Costco, get myself this hive and just turn the tap and go on I've heard bits about it. I've never tried, and the science behind it is amazing. Like just a simple, like the frames there, they just go like that and then go back, and then it breaks that seal, and then the honey drips out from where the bees would cap it. But I could just picture having the jar and having the bees going. They frenzy in the fall over robbing. If you spill any sort of honey or anything in the yard, they go nuts. And then if stuff gets gummed, it's just like having like the new washing machines that have like the iPad kind of screen on it. It's like the first thing to go is the technology, right? So that's why I kind of stay away from it. But the science is cool and it looks neat. And another thing would be, if you live somewhere where you're getting lots of honey, it would probably work great because you could just keep on it. But expensive though.
Yeah, that's one thing. But and if you want to start hives, is it better to start with 2 colonies?
You always either start with 2 or know someone around that can help you out at any time. Because if you have just one colony and something goes wrong, I mean it's real easy to call up. If you have 2, you can just mix and match, right? To an extent. Or if you know someone, you can just call them up, and a frame of eggs can come in handy, or a queen or something like that. So if you're all like when I was first starting, there wasn't anyone around, so it was always like I always wanted stuff to work with, because if something went wrong, it was a lot of work to track someone down, if they even had it on the other side of the island that you didn't know. Or it's best to have 2 hives, definitely. And the more the better. 50 would be awesome.
Do you think you need like a certain amount of property to do it?
No.
No, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, no.
You could do it in town, right?
Oh, easy. Easy. And once they're away, and they're not even like, I never get stung. Like the bees, I have people over, kids come over and run around, and dog, no problems at all. Like you can pick them up, and I do get stung. Okay, I'm kind of lying, but not very often. But like they don't bother anybody that I know of, or that I care to ask. But a small place, like if you had a yard, like even the size, you can put them on I've had them on when the bear got my bees that year. It didn't go over well. It's probably why I'm single these days. But I brought them all out of the grass and put them up on the balcony. Right, so they were flying in the house, and I didn't know what else to do. So the bear couldn't get at them, and it was just a space like the size of that table, the balcony, and right where you're living, kind of thing. And if you want them to fly up and out, you just put something out in front of their entrance instead of like going across the room. They're gonna go up and out over the tree. So. Mine now are kind of back in amongst kind of like a clearing, a bunch of trees, but they come out and they spiral up above the trees, and then from there go out. So they don't. You can direct where that bee line that they talk about. You can tell them where's kind of give them a guideline for where that bee line should be. So then they're not. If you lived on your neighbors are right there, you send them upwards, and then they're not flying across the lawn, and they're going up and over and around. So. Yeah, anywhere is fine. Yeah. As long as you're keeping on, I think keeping on the swarms is good, because there's so many bed and breakfasts and stuff here that once they, swarms are like showing up on someone's vacation onto their surfboard, it's going to be the end of, and then people start complaining and stuff. So as long as you're keeping them kind of in check, and out here I find my swarms have always gone to the old cedar snags and up in the top of the cedars. And
I was just curious, I'm sure you've heard of this, and I was wondering if you do it. So giving mycelium supplements to your bees to feed them,
that's
immune system, so they can, not get those mites so badly.
I know I've thought about that, and I know Stamets is working on that, and it sounds amazing, and I've been so busy I haven't really looked into it too much. But I mean that guy's a genius for lots of reasons. So like, apparently it works like a charm, especially for things like nosema and which is a midgut fungus the bees get, where it's basically when they're inside the moisture that you were talking about in the winter. These spores develop in their midguts, and then they can't get out to go to the bathroom, so one of them goes to the bathroom and spreads 5 million spores, and then they just basically, die.
Mycelium helps them come to these insides.
Yeah, it's like a probiotic. Yeah, it's like a probiotic form, and there's things that which is way better than, like, there is something you can use called famagulin, which is basically it's another spore / fungus / antibiotic, but I mean, like, then that stuff is, the wax absorbs that stuff, honey absorbs that stuff, and there's, I've been meaning to look into that lots, and I mean, like, interesting thing too is because you see the bees into weird stuff. So like, and I think that's how he noticed it. It was watching, because he's a mushroom farmer, and in a certain species of mushroom the bees were always visiting, right? And so he took it to the lab, but you see the bees in the weirdest places, and they're just grabbing micronutrients. So one day I was down just walking on the mud flats, and a little some sort of, I guess, seaweed or something like that had a weird, like, thing on it. They were just covered in it. They really liked they would be down getting salt, sea salt and stuff like that, and just weird.
Well, he gives a workshop every year on Cortez Island.
My grandpa I spent all my summers growing up on that place. I love that place. Yeah, I've always wanted, I should go see that. But that guy's a genius there,
Yes.
Have you talked about bear safety yet?
Yeah.
With,
Oh yes, electric fencing.
So is that really the only option to go with here?
Unless you like having bear meat in your freezer, probably.
So it's not only in the comic book that they are coming.
No. And the worst thing about bears, or the best thing about bears, if you have a good bear, this sounds like I'm a circus guy. If you have a good bear trained well, it's a good bear. You get rid of the good bear, they're territorial. So if you have a good bear that's used to get shocked once, knows that the bees are there, not a problem, knows to stay away, it'll maintain that area and pass it along to its children and stuff, cubs. And then you get rid of a good bear, bad bear comes in, kind of thing. So electric fencing, dirt cheap, works like a charm. Yeah, and it doesn't hurt when I get shocked all the time. First day I had it on, I forgot to turn it off. Do you guys have fencing?
We do.
You get shocked all the time?
Well, we have it around the chickens because our bees, we've got in a situation that where I'm going to assume is bear-proof. We never had an issue.
Yeah.
But the chickens are fenced, and that being said, you do want to, with your fencing, you do need to think about it pretty clear. Well, for the chickens, anyways, and not so much for the bees. But Bob Hansen, used to work Pacific Rim National Park. If you want to talk to someone about really good fencing, he's an excellent resource locally.
His costs a lot more than
his costs a lot more.
Well, I think they actually, if you're, there's actually it's like kind of like childcare subsidy. If you get to the, I don't know how to get there, but they will actually almost put the fencing in for free, like a rental kind of program if it's the right type of scenario. My fencing is just, I used a poultry net just because that's just what I got for the bees, but it works great for chickens too. It's just like a mesh kind of thing, because that way the bear can't like do the old, or like the limbo, or those things are crazy. Yeah, they can, they'll figure a way. But Bob Hansen, you probably get a hold of him through that Wild Smart, or
yes, I believe that's the
on the internet, and
he'll come and if anybody's interested,
he knows all the predators
and
and
help you set it up.
At least give you where to go and stuff like that. But it's such a cheap option, and it works great. I was just gonna say, the first time I forgot I had an electric fence and had a bunch of stuff. stepping over the fence anyways, got zapped in the wrong spot, fell into the yard, and then now it's no problem, like I'm used to it, but I'm sitting in there for like 10 minutes trying to figure out a way to get out because the charger was outside, right? So I ended up doing this kind of running dive roll kind of thing. And then, now I always try to turn it off first, but it does happen. It's no big deal, and used to have the chickens, and I have a Great Pyrenees big dog, and kind of she likes to seem like she's a real serious dog, like you wouldn't want to come in the house kind of thing. And she saw the chickens for the first time, so she's like, I'm going to go see what the chickens are because they like to check out everything new. She goes up and hold on, she got a little too close and got shocked by the fence and just arr, 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 and it doesn't even hurt, right? But it's just strange. That's what the bears aren't used to it, so it just freaks them right out. So she goes yelping away with her tail between her legs, and then the chickens would figure out how it's on like a pulse, right? So the fence would pulse, and as dumb as chickens are, these chickens were smart enough to wait for the pulse to stop and then bolt through the fence, so they'd always be out of the yard. And then, but she thought it was the chickens that got her. So every time a chicken got out of the yard, she thought they had the power. Right? It was good, yeah.
Jim, what do you do with the beeswax?
I was making soap for ages, and now it's like buckets and jars and stuff all over the shelf that I need to render down. I should do some candles. You can do candles, like lip stuff,
Right.
and all that.
How do you treat it after you take it out of the?
It's you just heat it.
Heat it?
Yeah, and there's lots.
Strain it?
You have to,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, like the cappings. Well, you don't have to, but it does get. It doesn't come out like the Michael's wax kind of thing at Michael's that's bleached and stuff. So it's kind of it's fun because the house smells good, but it's a lot of straining. I just use like heat it up and then pour it through get out like if there's dead bees or anything in there through like a tea strainer type of material, and then you can even put it in a big bucket of water, and then everything will go into the water, and then at the end the wax will float. If you have enough water, so all the sediment comes off and the wax floats to the top, and then just a couple renderings of that.
What about the bee pollen? Like, how do you collect that?
It's a trap. So it's like you could make one out of number 4 mesh hardwire, like a screen type stuff. And is what happens. It's the exact same size as a bee. So a bee goes in, spend all day working. It's like the tax man kind of things. So Len got all this stuff, starts. That's going to get me in trouble, I'm sure. Goes through the thing, and then it scrapes the pollen off their legs when they're going into a hive, and then falls into a little container below. The only thing is you got to make sure that the pollen, like there's times out here when there's so much pollen, like you could fill up jars in an hour, and then there's other times there's no pollen. So you just got to make sure it's a good pollen time and only put it on. I haven't gotten to that yet. Every year I'm going to build one, and then the year's over, and I'm going to do it next year. Most things, and then. And then the pollen falls into a little tray, but you want to keep it on for a couple hours so that you're not. That's what they feed their young with. So if you're taking all their pollen, then they're starving, right? So.
What about propolis?
Oh yeah, there's that. If you scrape some of that red stuff, take as much as you want off the top of those hives. That's what they use. It's resins from trees, and they use that. There's a thing called bee space. So anything bigger than a bee, like if you had a void, they would fill with those combs. Anything smaller than a bee that they couldn't fit through, they will fill with the propolis, which it's a glue, and it's an antibiotic glue that gets sourced from who knows what.
But it's good to just like scrape and use, or
I do. I've used it in broken teeth, keep going from going to the dentist. It works great. I mean, the one thing is I would start off with small little bits because it is anything that's not like pasteurized honey from the store. If you have allergies, you want to make sure that you don't just like. I think I did that with bee pollen the first time. I took this giant spoon and was like salivating for like 3 hours. Thought I was gonna. It was just too much, right? It was just like too much. And then, but yeah, no, the propolis you can taste some right there. That's that's been in the freezer since if you want to. Yeah, you can. Yeah, do it.
I think it tastes like Christmas, but
It's actually kind of neat. Yeah, they make it into usually like a tincture kind of thing, and then I know it's supposed to be like there's a lot of research on it. Go for it, go for it. It is, your teeth do get kind of, that's why they make tinctures, because it looks like you've been chain smoking for about 30 years, and maybe you don't go at first, because it's like a glue, right? So your teeth are all kind of red and stuff, and whatever.
How many hives do you have?
I think right now 7. I usually just I got like usually like to go into the winter with 10, just with working and parenting. I don't have as much time as I could, but that's lots for me. I think I ideally like I mean as much as you could have, I guess. You know, I've had like 18 before, I think.
Just curious about your spacings with your hives. Do you have any?
I stack them in right beside each other, in as best I can in rows, so I can work so I'd have 3 or 4 here, so I can work them this way, but then another row here, just enough so that I'm not standing right in front of their doors while I'm working, and then I don't find it a problem at all. I know they say you're supposed to have like 2 feet and stuff like that, but it's so easier to just be like, and then a lot of times you can use the hive next to you to rest stuff on the lid, or and even with moving them like the splits, they say you have to move them 2 kilometers or else they'll all fly back to the, and they do that a bit, but I've never had a problem. I just move them right over. And then if you start getting weak hives, how many hives do you?
I've only got the 2, so
yeah. You have one
but
stronger.
We're going to be adding this year.
Or you're gonna those 2 could turn into 8 or 4 or 8 easy. Yeah.
They're on our upper deck, so we don't want too many there.
If you ever need a spot to put them, yeah. Yeah, I got a good spot, lots of room. And still coming.
Well, we have 2 acres, but it's just the bear issue
the bear
as well.
thing. Oh, okay.
So we are toying with inside the chicken pen as well.
Yeah, it worked good. I never noticed a problem with the chickens and the bees. The ducks like eating the bees. I noticed, but the chickens never had a problem.
We had stellar jays just
that's the
picking off the bees.
And it's always like in spring when it's the first ones flying out. It's like, oh, there's bees. They survived, and then there's one stellar jay sitting right above the entrance. Or their first pollen coming in. Yeah, just you see, oh, my bees got their pollen's coming finally. A long winter and it's over, and look at the pollen, and then they're rascals for seedlings and everything else too.
You mentioned moving the bees. What's thought about putting bees on a trailer? Do you have
Oh yeah, lots of people do that, and that's a good one for out on the logging roads. Like, just get like a small trailer. You could fit like 10 hives on like a small trailer, and then electrify the trailer.
Okay.
Yeah, now same type of thing. You could tow it anywhere. The thing you'd want to, I mean, especially the way things are like around like Kennedy Flat, the thing you have to worry about more than bears or vandals. So you want to make sure you got either somewhere that like guys aren't going shooting, or somewhere you kind of not just where people are going to come and mess with it. But yeah, no, people do that quite often. Like you're talking about the fireweed, they'll take the fire up to the mountains on a trailer just for the fireweed hunting. Yeah, it's totally.
Are you able to move it multiple times, or is there a strategy to like leaving it once?
Well, I'm sure it's like I think the bees like having a central location, but like if you look at like the main most of the bees in North America start out in Texas and follow the blooms all the way up to Canada every year. So that moving them it's probably not the best for them, but I mean it's not like a lot of the bees in North America are getting trucked like 2,000 kilometers over the season, so that they do get through it, I guess, or to an extent. But yeah, you could have bees on a trailer and take them around, no problem. The thing is as long as you move them further than 2 kilometers. They say if you less than 2 kilometers, they'll go back to the old location. So if you just move them further, that they'll come out and be confused and reorientate, and that'll be their new spot. So you just move them put a screen on so they can't fly. Move them, let them sit for a day or so. Put a sign there so they know where to come back, like a branch or something, kind of thing. Yeah, no, people do that. Yeah. I've thought about doing that in the past. I just didn't got around to it. Yeah, it's a good idea though. Yeah. I mean, you can even have them, if you want them in your yard, just keep them on the trailer, you know, kind of thing.
Share text from what I was referring to earlier. That's feel free to, if you ever want to look into these guys, I can give you the info.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to look into that.
Which sounds crazy. Like,
Yeah, I don't believe it though.
I know it's I hear you.
I'm gonna check into it because that's awesome.
Because
But
when you told me that, I was like,
yeah, that's
the only place in the world apparently. Like,
that's what I thought too. I was like, there's no other beekeepers here. The mites won't exist. And but then I'm gonna check into that because that's neat to know. Yeah. Huh. What's the name of that?
the one I work for is like Bonifist Social Club. It's a restaurant and they do like farming and beekeeping. But he knows, like he's part of that association.
Okay. Yeah, mite-free bees. But then the thing is as soon as you bring your bees to anywhere else, if you had a mite-free yard, then you're probably going to end up with mites too, right? So.
Yeah, there's just a big ban on it's like equipment and bees right now in Flint too. Like, you definitely can't.
Well, that's how the island used to be. It could have been a huge player for supplying the world with honeybees if that one guy. It's always one guy. It ruins it for everybody.
Yeah. That's what.
You got a few in mind.
So I saw this documentary about almond farmers in California who were employing beekeepers to come and bring their bees to their farms.
Yeah.
Is that a market up on the West Coast too?
Yeah, like the blueberries and all that. Yeah, a lot of people even on the island do that pollination. I know in this, like what you're talking about in the States, it's like the money the beekeepers get from pollination is like 30 times the amount that the country brings in for honey. So that's where the money's at.
And
right?
they get like some of the beekeepers are malicious. They go around and steal other people's bees, and
it gets or you steal the it's
reality TV show.
That's a good one. Yeah.
It's coming.
I have a float house about 7 miles up Lemons Inlet.
Yeah. You still got them there?
Yeah.
Okay, because I remember last time we were, and they're still.
So because they're naturalized and they seem to be, just doing fine in the wild. I assume they're not from town.
Yeah, are they honeybees for sure?
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
So how would I go about starting a hive with them?
Well, there's where are they located? Like in a wall cavity or?
Oh no, they're not in the wall anymore. But they still come around.
Oh, you mean they're coming around?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna want to build like a little trap, and you can order they call it a swarm lure, or you can make your own. Like if ever I have like a queen that doesn't make it, or you can save them and squish her up with some vodka and then put a drop there. But I know lemongrass. Is the same pheromone that the workers, when they swarm, use to draw in all the other workers. And if you just Google homemade swarm lure, and it'll just give you some essential oils and stuff, because when the bees do swarm, they're looking for that spot to go, and then the scouts find spots and they start fanning this smell, and whichever one comes back the strongest is the spot to go. So if you have a cavity set up that looks appealing to them, and then you have that smell in there, it's a good chance. I've caught them before even without just having a box. I always leave like a box hanging up in the tree, because a lot of times you just give them a space. But especially like through June and July, if you just kept a little bit of that on a cotton wall, some of that smell in there, it's that's from what I've heard the way to go for luring them in. And then if you find them, like if I don't know if this is true. I've heard stories about if you can see them on the flower or on a flower, and then cover them with some flour, then they're all white. You can see them where they're kind of like like gold panning down the river. Like you find I found a fleck of gold, and you keep moving up till you find like the kind of thing. So you can do that, and then start seeing.
There was a Vinyl Cafe episode about that.
The same type of thing.
The kids followed the bees with a plate of honey, and they just.
I've heard about people following them because then you can see them, they're white, and you can see them more of a distance, and then you just keep following them until you kind of find the epicenter, and then and if that's because if you have honeybees, there could be someone keeping. I know Pete had years ago up at Cat Face that would have been way before Mite, so, not way before, but it probably might have been Mite free, but I know the bears got him. I've heard stories of someone at some point had someone Bargus. And I mean, I know there's some people in town that have issued some swarms, and so that's not, they could have come, like, maybe survived, and like I said, like, they don't typically survive in the wild, but that's not to say it doesn't happen and can happen. So that could have been a swarm that, like, made it over to, you know, Mears Island or somewhere just there, but then that next year split into 4 swarms, and then they moved another 5 kilometers. So they can cover a pretty, you look at like the killer bees that started out and just moved, you know, they cover, if they move 4 kilometers every time, and some bees, depend on which bees they are, can swarm like 5 times a year, right? So that's that's 20 miles. So yeah, just Google the swarm lure. Yeah. And then just a little.
We're a bit less than 5.
Okay, 5 minutes in count, so yeah, it's good to see everybody and familiar new faces, and yeah, thanks for listening. And I'm always approachable about bees, so just ask someone to track me down. I mean, Yuki on Willowbrae, or Leah, or anyone can pass along my number and stuff, and give me a call. And
Do you produce honey on a commercial level, or what?
no, on good years, it's just like
It's just like more of a.
it's like being at the fair with a cotton candy machine. It's just
Right.
like and yeah, it goes quick to the, and then you know, somebody, my little guy the other day, he's like, give me some honey. It's like 4, and I'm like, you can't have honey, it's too late. He's like, they're my bees. So yeah, it goes quick, but you can have enough. Like if more people were doing it, then you could have a collective like like they're doing down. You know, like if more people were to come together, then it's not so much being the only guy that's got a bucket of honey kind of thing. It gets overwhelming. You know, you're kind of. But if more people were doing it, then everyone would have their, you know, enough for their friends, because it can go quite far. Like if, you know, if there's someone on every block, everyone would have jars of honey through the winter, kind of thing.
You said 20, it produces 20, what was your
A good year,
measurement?
20 pounds, so like 20 jars.
Out of all the bees you have?
No, out of a
20?
hive, on a
Out
good
one
hive,
hive.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But then,
I didn't realize it was so little.
out here, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just because we don't, it's all trees and water, right? So it's like if you were somewhere where there are mass fields and agriculture, yeah, so out here it's just like, there's no nectar or pollen in the cedars and stuff, and then the ocean takes up a lot of real estate.
And do you sell your beeswax? Or would you?
Oh yeah, I don't have lots, but if it's like for, you know, friends and people that ask and have a project that they're going, but.
Yeah,
you know,
we made these this morning.
With beeswax?
Beeswax cloths.
So you call me when you get home. Those look great.
Yeah, they are. It's pretty cute.
Wow.
Better than cellophane.
That's for sure. Yeah, no, I trade you some wax for some
Yeah,
wax.
there you go.
I'll need the wax, so it'll be. Use the wax first.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Yeah.
You don't even have to. Okay. All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to see you all.